Some houses feel warm, welcoming, like home. They hold laughter, late-night talks, and the smell of home-cooked meals. But some houses hide something far darker. A place where nightmares press against the walls, where every shadow seems to breathe. And even the bravest souls are forced to run. This is the story of America's most infamous haunted house, the Amityville Horror. Was it real, or the greatest paranormal hoax in history? Tonight, we're going to walk through the facts, the claims, and the most chilling moments reported by those who lived through it. Before the Lutz family ever set foot inside, the house on 112 Ocean Avenue was already tainted with blood. On the night of November 13th, 1974, the neighborhood awoke to an unspeakable horror. 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr., a young man by any measure, stood accused of taking a rifle and murdering his mother and father, and 4 younger siblings as they slept. 6 lives ended in the quiet hours of the night. A perfect suburban home became a crime scene. What makes the story more disturbing than the violence itself is the cold, inexplicable nature of what happened. All 6 victims were found lying face down. There were no clear signs of a struggle. Neighbors reported that they heard nothing, no shouts, no pleas, no frantic noises. Those details left investigators asking, why didn't anyone wake? Why were they lying face down? At trial, Ronald DeFeo pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to consecutive life terms. He would later make various claims about voices and urges that led him to act. But the crime itself left a stain on the house that would not wash away. 1 year later, in December 1975, the house stood empty, its windows like dark eyes, waiting for someone to make it a home again. Enter George and Kathy Lutz, a family seeking a fresh start. They were drawn to the grand curves and ample rooms of the Dutch colonial-style house. 6 bedrooms, a living room with wide windows, a basement, and a small boathouse near the water. They knew, of course, that the house had a history, but the price was low, and they hoped to rebuild a life. On December 19th, 1975, they moved in. At first, there were ordinary things to do, unpacking, setting up beds, and filling the rooms with the small comforts that make a house a home. George took photographs. They celebrated the holidays. Then the subtle signs began. A chill in a room that heaters could not explain. A smell like rotten eggs that appeared and vanished. And most unsettling of all, a feeling that they were not alone. George began waking at the same time each night. 3:15 a.m., the hour the DeFeo murders occurred. Objects moved without explanation. Doors banged in empty rooms. And perhaps the most grotesque detail, swarms of flies that did not belong in winter. They crawled on walls, windows, and furniture as if the house had become a hive of rot. But the experiences were not limited to pests and noises. The children began to speak of a figure they could not fully describe. They called it Jody, an apparition the children associated with strange behavior and bad dreams. In some retellings, Jody is described as pig-like, in others simply as something otherworldly with glowing eyes. Kathy reported physical marks, deep scratches and welts that appeared on her body overnight. She described waking to find herself off the bed, small bruises on her skin, and a sense of being pushed by an invisible force. There were recordings too, tapes made by the family and by investigators. When played back, some of those tapes contained whispers, low moans, or sounds that listeners could not identify. A priest, Father Ralph Pecoraro, came to bless the home. He had performed blessings many times, but what he described after his visit was unusual. While sprinkling holy water, witnesses say an angry voice shouted, "Get out!" The priest, shaken, left the home, and later reported mysterious illness and chills that he could not otherwise explain. Photographers captured images that showed anomalies, bright spots of light, smudges, and in one widely circulated photograph, the suggestion of a child's face peering from an upstairs doorway. Such photographs would become central to the debate, evidence to believers, suspicious artifacts to skeptics. The family described episodes of levitation. Kathy said she sometimes felt lifted off the bed by an invisible power. George reported nightmares so intense he would wake gasping, convinced the house had a life of its own. Their home, once a place of promise, had become an arena of fear. When the Lutzes fled, they left in such haste that personal items remained behind: clothes, children's toys, even food on the table. It was a visual that reporters could not ignore. A family gone in the night, possessions abandoned, doors left open. The Lutzes never moved back. Word of their escape spread across the nation, and the story attracted the attention of crime reporters, tabloid newspapers, and paranormal investigators. Among those who answered the call were Ed and Lorraine Warren, a name that would become synonymous with the Amityville case. The Warrens were not neutral observers. Ed described himself as a demonologist, Lorraine, a self-professed clairvoyant. When they entered the house, Lorraine wrote later that she felt a presence so heavy. It was like being swallowed by darkness. Ed believed the home was a center of concentrated evil, a place where malevolent forces gathered and fed. They conducted their own investigation, taking photographs, interviewing the family, and reporting on symbols and marks they believed to be occult in nature. For believers, the Warrens' testimony added a layer of spiritual authority. For skeptics, it raised questions about bias and credibility. The Warrens had many supporters and many critics. There are episodes in the Lutz account that read like scenes from a horror film, small moments that, when stitched together, create an overwhelming sense of dread. For instance, nights when the house seemed to breathe, the floorboards exhaling as if relieved. Or mornings when the family's beds were found disheveled in ways that made no sense. Blankets folded strangely, pillows thrown across the room, as if an invisible presence had been rummaging through the home. George would describe waking to the sound of a child's laughter echoing through the hallways. A laugh that turned to screaming when no child was found. Kathy spoke of anxiety so intense that she could barely stand, of a heaviness pressing on her chest as if some unseen weight lay upon her. Neighbors reported subtle signs too. A car that idled outside late at night, headlights turned off. Or the sudden gathering of stray animals near the property, crows and stray dogs that seemed to circle the house. When investigators and researchers examined the house, they used tools both scientific and spiritual. Recorders captured low-frequency sounds. Cameras revealed anomalies many found difficult to explain. Clergy performed blessings and prayers, reporting discomfort and illness after leaving the site. The psychology of a family under stress is also relevant. Sleep deprivation alone can produce hallucinations and paranoia. Add social pressures, media attention, and the knowledge that the house had become a story millions would read about. And you have fertile ground for a narrative to grow. Then there is the business of horror. Books and films were not inevitable. Someone had to tell the story and sell it. Jay Anson's book, released in the late 70s, turned events into a best-selling narrative. And Hollywood soon followed, translating those pages into images that would be imprinted on the public imagination. The cinematic versions amplified terror. They added scenes, visuals, and sound design meant to startle an audience. What was once described in a sleepy newspaper account became stylized shock in theaters, a transformation from local tragedy to global spectacle. Over the years, the house at Amityville became both shrine and sideshow. Curiosity seekers, ghost hunters, and journalists visited. Some came away feeling unsettled, others left unimpressed. Legal battles followed as well. Disputes over rights, statements, and the sale of the story created a backdrop of tension that complicated the narrative. And Ronald DeFeo Jr. remained a dark figure in the periphery. Imprisoned, often cited in subsequent retellings of the events. His motives, whether psychological, criminal, or inexplicable, are still debated. If you are researching this story for the first time, you should know the evidence is contested. Some items, like photographs or tapes, are accessible to the public. Others exist only as stories told by those involved. What makes the Amityville case uniquely compelling is how it sits at the crossroads of crime, media, and belief. It is at once a criminal tragedy and a modern myth. Tonight's story is built on testimony, photographs, recordings, and the lingering question of why a family would leave everything behind in the middle of winter. Whatever your conclusion, the Amityville Horror will remain a part of America's haunted imagination. A story we return to, generation after generation, to ask, what happens in the dark when we are not looking? Would you spend a night inside 112 Ocean Avenue? If this story chilled you to the bone, tell me in the comments, real or hoax? If you enjoyed this deep dive into a dark chapter of American lore, hit like and subscribe. This channel will bring you more true hauntings, investigations, and mysteries. And remember, some houses never let you leave.